first ever episode of Here's a Scoop with Colt Vessels, myself, Penn Little, and Rachel Pozzi. We're all coming from different states, and we're going to go ahead and get right to it because it has been an interesting week in the world of horsemanship. I think everybody would agree. And joining us right now is nine-time world champion cowboy Ty Murray, and horseman coming from Stephenville, Texas. Rachel's in Edgewood, New Mexico. Colt's up there in Kalispell, Montana, where it looks like it's a little bit colder than everywhere else. And on the line, we have Rick Dawson, the owner of Rich Strike, the winner of the recent Kentucky Derby after 81-1, a pretty amazing thing, as well as 14 times AQHA Trainer, Paul Jones, who is coming to us from where are you today, Paul? In California?
California,
And Rick, you're back in my home state, Oklahoma, I take it.
I am. I'm back in Edmond, Oklahoma.
That's home for me. Mr. Dawson, congratulations. And we're going to let everyone just kind of ask you a question about their recent success because everybody was, I think, awestruck by your big win. So I'll let Rachel go ahead and get started.
Nice to meet you, Rick. I think we can all definitely attest to the fact that we weren't expecting it, and I'm sure you weren't either, but I think that's what brings all the intrigue to the scenario. So, I think recently we've seen a lot of questions just in the media sphere, the news sphere, not news sphere, regarding your decision to not run the horse in the Preakness. And obviously we, our group ourselves, we don't have any pre-founded opinions on that, but I know you haven't really had a chance to talk about it or say anything beyond, just making the decision you need to make. We'd love to take the opportunity with the group that we have here to let you say from a training standpoint, as an owner standpoint, what went into making the decision you did and what you'd hope the public can hear from a professional standpoint.
Well, I actually made this decision a couple of months ago in a meeting I had with my trainer where I told him that if we were lucky enough to get into the Derby, that I would elect to skip the Preakness because it's only 2 weeks rest in between and then pick another race. Our sights were on Derby and then probably the Belmont if we ran well in the Derby. All of it was contingent on that. Obviously we won, but the decisions never changed. The horsemen that you have on the show with me today, they're very aware of horses and the time that's probably necessary for them to recover from tough races, etc. And I have other horses that we run in allowance competition. We don't run those back in 2 weeks. It's usually 4 weeks. 4 to 6 is kind of the perfect window for us. And Rich Strike has been on that type of cycle now since we claimed him back last fall. Horses, I think, are creatures of habit, so to speak. I think you get them on a certain schedule, and if you can maintain that, then then it's a big plus. It was a huge temptation to go to the Preakness, I promise you. However, when you back up as an owner, and I'm a very new owner. I've been in about 6 years or so, but I've always made the decisions based on what's best for the horses, what's best for us. I've made that known publicly in other interviews, and it hasn't changed now, and it won't change next week or next month or next year. And so that's kind of where we were, and that's where we are now. And it just so happens that, the Belmont's 5 weeks out from the Derby, that perfect for us. And then a race that I've always had my eye on is the Travers, which is in late August at Saratoga. And that's the race that Rich Strike's father, King Ice, gave American Pharaoh his only loss of his career. So it's been a race that I've kind of been pointing to for a while. So it sets up perfectly for us with plenty of time to rest in between. and keep our horse as sound as possible. And hopefully he can make the next, 3 to 5 races healthy and sound and himself. And that was really the backstory to why we made the decision we made.
I guess let's go to Paul, Mr. Jones, obviously, who is most expertise.
I'd just like to state that I totally agree with their decision. I think that's the smart way to go. I'm 100% agree with that decision. To run a horseback that run that hard in 2 weeks and travel him to another racetrack, it's very hard on him, and that's why we don't have very many Triple Crown winners. And it knocks them out, and it takes a while for a horse to recover. I think a lot of people do run them back in the 2 weeks because of the money and the fame and the glory, but I think that they're making the right decision. I really respect their decision. They're doing right by the horse, and they'll have a good horse in the following race because of it.
That's great commentary, Paul. And Ty Murray, of course, knows what it's like to put pressure on a body, especially when you're doing 3 events, the National Finals Rodeo and Rough Stock, 30 rides in 10 nights. But what question do you have for Mr. Dawson?
Well, I just want to congratulate him, too. That was one of the most exciting Kentucky Derbies or races, period, for that matter, that I can ever remember seeing. It's very, very special horse. And I think the mark of a good trainer is they know their horse, or owner and trainer is that they know their horse. And that's what you do, is you adjust the situation to fit the horse.
Thanks, Ty.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what everyone else has already said. I mean, I think this has only happened 2-3 times in the last 200 years or something. I mean, that's
the second longest. I think is number 2.
Yeah, number 2. I mean, just the odds and the story behind it. I think that's really the part that gets me. I've been around horses and in the industry, specifically racing, my entire life. I mean, my nickname is, I was a Colt, not a filly, so that's where Colt comes from. I think that one of my most memorable times on the track was getting to watch No Secrets win the All-American. And that brings me to my question. People always ask, well, are you a betting man? And I say, no, I'm not. But I do put money on my horse to win the race when I have a horse in the race. So I have to ask you, did you put any money on your horse?
Certainly.
Well, then I'm sure you made out just fine, man.
It was, we always, Eric Reed, the trainer, is such a great guy. He's just big-hearted. You guys have probably seen it in his interviews. He's the second generation trainer. I felt like I had 2 trainers, actually. I had Eric and his father, Herbert, and they live on the same 135 acres there in Lexington. And I asked Eric, how many times have you trotted over to Dad's house in the last month or 2? And he said, I couldn't count them, how many times I've gone over and we've sat and strategized and talked and discussed. And so it's been a great thing for them and their family. But, it's interesting because Eric doesn't bet at all. I love to bet horses. I've been betting horses for 40 plus years. But I'm still, a $20 better. I mean, now when my horse is running, I probably have a little more in the race than that, but not a great deal. I think, I don't know. I think I bet a few $100 on the Derby and a variety of different bets, but I've never really changed. I've always, I go to an off-track betting facility here in Oklahoma, and with my buddies, one of them in second grade, and some other guys, and we get together once or twice a week, and we have a few cold beers and bet horses, and we usually go to Oakland once or twice a year and watch the races over there. So yeah, I'm a huge race fan. Not only an owner, but I'm just a huge race fan.
Awesome. And I guess thank you. That leads me to my question. My dad he was a polo player, and he used to play he played at the University of Pennsylvania, then played at Bobmore Farms at Broad Acres, right south of you there, Rick.
Yeah, I've been by it many times on my way to an OU football game, actually.
I recall 2009, and I've watched every Derby, since I can remember, and Mind That Bird. And there were many similarities. However, when I right after I watched the Derby, I wanted to see the overhead, and I couldn't have really access that the next day. However, I looked at the next 10 or I guess 11 Derbies after that, and I noticed that Bob Baffert would often have one of his horses on the rail. And strategically, it appeared that nobody thought about that this time. And a lot of people tried to eliminate that strategy that, Mind That Bird sneaking out, and even the NBC commentator couldn't see him until he was probably 5 lengths in the lead. Was it a strategic decision to make that late move and look for the rail? And that's really my biggest question, because it was very well executed. And the way he kind of slipped through that hole, it almost looked like Barry Sanders. That's it. The other school up there down there in Oklahoma. But so Barry Sanders, back when he was playing for the Lions, slipping through a hole, it was just beautifully executed.
Yes. In fact, Sonny Leon, our trainer, in every race that he has ridden, strike, strategy is all, because we get out of the gate okay, we break okay, but we don't really show a lot of speed until the last, quarter of the race, whatever we might be in. And so typically the plan is to get him out and then get him over to the rail and obviously go the shortest distance possible. In the Derby, we were 17th or something like that coming around the top of the final turn. And so we have to pass a whole bunch of horses. And so when he started gaining momentum, I saw at the top of the turn, our horse was really starting to move. I spotted our silks, and it's so hard to find your horse, but I spotted the silks and I could see that he was moving faster than those around him. But we had a lot of ground to make up. And then when we ran into a wall of horses at the top of the stretch, Sonny was very patient, sat just in behind them, kind of just chilled out. It was pretty fun to watch. He didn't have to check our horse, but he just had to just hold him a little. And then they parted slightly, and he went through that hole and then immediately down on the rail. And then when he came up on Messier, if you'll notice, just before he goes to the right of Messier, he looks to the rail, and he's thinking about going to the rail because that's always been his instructions from Eric. But it could have gotten tight. Messier could have moved in, and any interruption in our ability to run our race at that point, we're not going to win. I mean, if he hesitates slightly at all. So he went to the outside, he glanced over his shoulder, went to the outside, and noticed he really pulled the horse very hard to the right. Wrist strike responded perfectly. They jumped to the right, and then he went right back inside. And of course, epicenter is flaring out slightly to hook up with Zandon, so that Zandon has to go wider. Just jockeys being competitive. But what happened is it opened up that. I mean, by the time epicenter got to the wire, he's probably in the 7th or 8th hole. So there's plenty of room on the rail, and our guy went through it. I saw him when he had his head cocked toward epicenter. I knew that he knew that's the horse to beat. And it was just a matter of whether he's going to pass him before the finish line or after. But I assure you, he was going to pass epicenter at some point. He always does. He thinks he's undefeated. He passes every horse on the track before he stops running. That's just our horse. So we've always known that we had something kind of special. Yeah, no way I can say that we were, months ago we knew we were going to win the Derby, but we always thought we had a really solid horse. He kept improving. The further he went, the better he got. And the Derby set up perfect for him at 1.25 miles. And you have to have racing luck in that race. 20 horses is just nuts. And so, I mean, it's a lot of traffic. And we passed, I think we were 17th. So we passed 16 horses in the last 1/4 mile. And something else that Paul and other horsemen, Ty, would probably appreciate. The official clocker contacted my trainer this week and told him that Rich Strike is one of only a handful of horses to ever run the last quarter in the Kentucky Derby in under 25 seconds. And he says there's only one horse to run the last eighth of a mile in 12. And my trainer says, who is that? He says, you. Rich Strike ran the last eighth of a mile. So he ran a mile and an eighth, and then he ran an eighth of a mile in 12 flat.
Wow.
And I think he would have ran the next eighth in 12, to be
Wow.
honest with you. I mean, he was rolling. So the Belmont sets up very well for us. It's not that the Preakness wouldn't have. I think, had the Preakness had these two races been split, I mean, we'd be going to the Preakness. It's not the race. It's not the track. It's none of that. It's just what we think's best for our horse, and it's giving him the rest that he's used to getting in between races and getting ready for the next one. We feel like he has a great future, and running 2 weeks and then 3 weeks later in the Belmont may jeopardize that future, and we don't do anything to do that. So the decision, like I said, we made a couple of months ago based on the fact that if we get into the Derby, then we'll skip the Preakness. And our other idea was if we don't get into the Derby, we'd probably run the Peter Pan or the Preakness, just point toward them. And then probably if we ran in the Preakness, we probably would have skipped the Belmont because it's only 3 weeks away. So it was all about giving the horse plenty of time to recover and get ready for the next race, whatever that might be.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time. And I guess if you're being a Sooner fan, Barry Switzer said, people don't know what it is to be champions. Oklahoma invented it, and we're certainly proud to have a new champion from Oklahoma like yourself.
Did you guys happen to notice the program? The program, they called my trainer last week. Churchill calls my trainer and says, hey, by the way, on your silks, what colors are those? We got pictures of them. And he says, well, they're Sooner red and white. And they said, Sooner red. They said, Sooner red. He says, yeah, Sooner red. He said, my owner's an Oklahoma University fan, and everybody will know what Sooner red is. So if you look at the official program, that's the description of the silks are Sooner red and white with white sleeves and Sooner red hoops. And I actually designed it after what kind of looks like a football jersey. That was my plan when I designed the silks.
I was busting Ty's chops a few days ago. His wife is a big Clemson fan. And I said, I'm sorry, we took your, what I think is the best coach in land now.
That was an incredible find and getting Brent to come. By the way, last night I was at a gathering and I FaceTime with Coach Switzer and I showed him a hat I brought to him. And, Coach Switzer, you don't get a word in edgewise with him. He pretty much takes over the conversation, which was awesome. And so we're back and forth. And he says, don't let anybody get that hat. Give it to my daughter. Don't let anybody. And he says, next time you're in Norman, come by and I'll give you one of my Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl hats. And I said, perfect. You got a deal, Coach. We'll make a trade.
Coach Wilkinson said that it's the man that tries and fails is far greater than the man who never tried at all. And I think that you got a last minute shot. You gave it the best, and you believed in the horse, and you're really shocked the world. And I know it's probably been a wild few weeks for you, but we appreciate your time, and we really appreciate the inspiration that has been your team for many out there.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you guys having me on, especially with these two guys that I share the microphone with Ty and Paul. These guys are legends in their sports. I've watched both of them many, many, many times over the years. So thanks to everybody. Thanks for having me on, and maybe we'll see you guys talk to you after the Belmont.
That'd be great. Good luck, and we'll talk soon. And Paul, stay on the line there.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much and congratulations again. I really admire your decisions and good luck in the future.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rick.
And that's coming from a real horseman right there, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a great segue. Paul Jones. I'm going to go ahead and let Colt get started with Paul Jones.
Well, I'd just like to start with saying, Paul, I really appreciate you giving us this time. I kind of grew up around a lot of guys, but you've always been a a mainstay in my life around the track and around the stables. And I remember I would always sneak into your office in particular, or I'd sneak around, and all the good trainers had all the good, like, donuts or good, food, stuck away somewhere. And I would always know where to go. And, I never seemed to get in trouble, by you at least. So I appreciate your patience with me as I grew up. I admire what you do with the horses. I admire that you put the horses first, and you think very, very hard, and it's different with each horse. I've seen you work with numerous horses over the years, and obviously you have a system that works well because of your accolades. Some people, they see thoroughbreds, they see quarter horses. Well, to them, it's just a racehorse. They don't understand the specifics. They don't understand the different lengths. What is your experience with quarter horses versus thoroughbreds in their specific breeds?
Well, mainly, for what the general public would understand better, is a quarter horse is a short distance runner and a thoroughbred is a long distance runner. A quarter horse is typically a stockier, more muscular horse with a little more power, and a thoroughbred is usually a little bit of a longer, lankier horse that runs long distance. So, and then the difference between them is the way we train them is quite a bit different. The way we feed them is a little bit different. And, but general care, horses are horses, but definitely in the way they're trained is definitely one of the big differences in quarter horses and thoroughbreds. And a lot of our quarter horses have thoroughbred bloodlines in them, but it's typically the bloodlines that are the speed bloodlines that not always work in the thoroughbred world, but they cross well sometimes for outcross with quarter horses.
Fantastic.
So kind of something that rang true when we were talking to Mr. Dawson is the decision he made for his specific horse. And when he mentioned, and this got me, when he mentioned that his horse wasn't going to stop running until it passed every horse on the track, that brings up the idea to me that every horse runs different. And what a lot of people don't see is the behind the scenes of how every individual horse is trained, how every horse's style is different. And I think there's a lot of idiosyncrasies that go between thoroughbreds and quarter horses. And what Colt had already said is when people see horse racing, they struggle to delineate between quarter horses and thoroughbreds. And they are often such different horses. And this even comes into just the practices on the track, the things that we see, the traditions on different tracks that interfere. And the circumstances of the Triple Crown races and the Breeders' Challenge race, we have a little bit different setting. There's interviewers that want to come up and interview after the race. How you go to the winner's circle is different. How you cool down is different. All of that is affected by that certain race setting. And I think the general public, there's a lot of things that they don't get to see or they don't get to understand. They just see the big race and then that's it. And if you as a trainer and all the times you've been on the track, you've had plenty of winning horses, what are some things that you would hope that the average horse person or the general public could hear or understand about that they don't get to see, and that can lead to some misconceptions about how the horses, how they run and how you guys handle them and what happens because they just don't get to see that?
Each horse is different. Each horse is an individual. Like his horse, that's his running style. He has that late run, and he has the will to get by the other horses. And one thing as a trainer, what we like to do with our horses is the horse, you don't make them run. They got to want to run. And you got to make it a good experience for them. You got to make them like it and want to do it. You don't never force a horse to do it. So one thing that's always good in training horses is always you want a good experience. Like in quarter horse racing, if a horse gets run over out of the gate and cut off and dirt thrown in his face, well, they get a bad experience out of that. And that doesn't teach them proper. So, one of the things like I've always been, real important to me is that the general public doesn't understand as trainers. we want our horses to be happy, and we want them to want to run, and they got to want to do it. You don't make them do it. And they want to do it because they like it, and they like it because it's been a good experience for them. And if you make it a bad experience, then they don't want to do it.
Yeah, I think there is a lot that goes on that no one hardly gets to see, and that includes the personalities and getting in sync with every individual horse. And if you've got a horse that he's got a certain style determined by his personality, whether that's tenacity or or timidness or shyness, they're all different animals. And so I think that really rings true.
Yeah, they all do have different styles, different running styles, different personalities. There's each horse you have to treat as an individual. There's some horses have early speed, some horses have late speed, some horses, they're all definitely different. But I really respect their decision. I just want to point it out again. I really respect their decision to skip the next race, because it is so difficult to bring a horse back in 2 weeks after they've run that hard and to come back in 2 weeks and to travel to a different surface, a different track, a different atmosphere. It really takes a toll on a horse. And like I said earlier, that's why there's not many Triple Crown winners, because then you come back in 2 weeks, it knocks them out again, and then you come back in 3 weeks and you don't have the same horse anymore. So by skipping this race, their horses, they would come into this race probably with about 60% horse instead of 100% horse. So by skipping this and then go into the next one with about 40% horse. So by skipping this race, they're going to come into the following race with 100% horse again. And typically that's a tough decision for owners to make because of the greed and wanting to run the horse. It's the owner's ready to run and not a horse isn't. But they're totally making the right decision. I really respect the fact that they're doing that. I really give them a lot of credit for that.
That's a great point. I think that the fact that Mr. Dawson said they made that decision before the Kentucky Derby, and they've stuck with the plan and sticking with the plan. Mm-hmm. I think that even winning, it shows that they believe in their horse. However, they know their horse and they are going to stick with the plan. And I'm going to segue that to Ty Murray. So I'm going to let you go ahead and finish up.
Well, I guess my question would be, obviously you're a legend in this game, and I'm always curious to who you looked up to and who you feel like you've learned the most from in becoming one of the leading trainers of all time.
I'm a second generation trainer myself. My dad was a trainer. I grew up mostly here in California. I learned the basics from my dad. But one of the trainers that I've always admired the most is Blaine Schwaneveld. Because growing up, he was the king of quarter horse racing. Mm-hmm. Although I never worked for him, he was basically my biggest competitor when I started. But I really admired his work ethics, his horsemanship, and I really watched everything he did, how his horses looked, how they acted, how he treated them, how they were groomed. I really paid a lot of attention because I like to watch the people that I admire and try to learn just by watching how they do things. So he was probably the quarter horse trainer that I respected the most and really admired when I was a kid.
I always find that interesting. I think that anybody that you look at that has some degree of achievement, it's always fun to see who that's linked to.
Yeah, he was definitely the king. I think he was probably one of the greatest horse trainers that's ever lived. I've been fortunate enough to surpass a lot of his records, but I still think, I still respect him as one of the best horsemen.
Paul, before you go, if I could jump in real quick and just for the people listening, if you could give us a short recap of maybe your top 3 favorite stories or success stories rather with horses that you've been a part of.
Well, probably, one of the most memorable would be my first Champions of Champions win. When I was a kid, I always dreamed of winning the Champions of Champions. that was the biggest race for older horses here in California. It was actually the biggest race for older horses in the nation. And I always dreamed of winning it. I'd ran it a few times. I've been in it a few times. And then finally in 2002, I won my first Champion of Champions with a horse called Who's Leaving Who. That was probably one of the most memorable wins in my career. And then also my first All-American fraternity win when I won it with Color Cartel. That was a huge thrill. And then to come back the following year and win it with No Secrets Here, Colt's dad's horse, that was a big thrill to win it 2 years in a row. It was amazing. And then probably my biggest goal was to try to, the first time I won the champion trainer title, the national AQHA champion trainer title. So my goal in life was to win it once. So 14. The first time was the best one. Yeah, I never dreamed of 14, but I wanted to win all these races once, and then I was fortunate enough to win it many a time. So I would have never dreamed of it when I was young.
Right now, who is your favorite quarter horse racing, with a racing background stallion that's now standing at stud?
Oh, that's now standing at stud?
The younger stallion, up and coming.
My favorite stallion, obviously, is Favorite Cartel. I have a little bit of a tie to him because I bred him and trained him. He was number 2 in the nation in 2021. And 2020, he was number 1 in the nation. So he's been a really good stallion. So I'm pretty partial to him.
Okay, well, that's understandable.
I know, Paul, you're probably the best person to answer this, and I know this will kind of help us segue into, I know a lot about what Ty wants to talk about. We kind of going back to, your experience as a trainer, you've obviously won a ton of races, especially with quarter horses. There is some extraordinary conditions and circumstances that occur only in the major thoroughbred races, the Triple Crown races, the Breeders' Cup, as far as, when the horses finish a race and going to the winner's circle. And obviously we know there's a big debacle regarding, how Rich Strike acted after the race. But I know that the circumstances that horse was under was different than any circumstances he had previously been trained for in the environment he's used to because of, how these horses normally go to the winner's circle. And I think, as far as my understanding is in quarter horse racing, it's a little bit different how the horses finish a race, they cool down, they go to the winner's circle. And even in thoroughbred racing, it's a little bit different. But the Triple Crown races are a little bit unique in how they handle everything. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a typical, in a quarter horse race, our horses pull up and then they make their way back to the winner's circle on their own. There's no, anytime an outrider would help a horse, it's only because the horse needed help. But typically they come back on their own, on their own without an outrider, without a pony, and they jog back to the winner's circle and that. The difference, I think that's probably 99% of all racing, they come back on their own. But during these big races, the Kentucky Derby and these races, the outriders ride up and grab a hold of them because they're going to do an interview. The gal comes up and interviews the jockey as they're making their way back to the winner's circle. So it's very different, and then here you got an outrider that doesn't know anything about this horse. This horse might not go with a pony. He might not be used to going with a pony. And, he just gets up and grabs him with a long hold and allows the horse to jump on his pony. It was kind of a bad situation.
And I think definitely too, because, the track situation too, that environment and how they handle specifically because of the interviews, you can probably guarantee the other prior races that horse ran in, he didn't have someone running up trying to get an interview from him,
He's never been escorted back he's never been escorted back. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Right.
And you're still dealing with a 3-year-old horse.
And they're not expected to do a Disney World commercial after the Super Bowl of horse racing like they would.
Right. And I mean, yeah. But unfortunately, when the guy did get into a bind, he should have either kind of got the horse into a gallop and tried to gallop out of it, or cut the horse loose and get away from him. And then rather than sit there and try to fight with him, but that's just my opinion.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Paul. And we're going to move to our feature guest now, so you can go ahead and hang up the line. Thank you very much, and you have a great day. And we appreciate you taking the time. Your contributions are unmatched, and we appreciate all of your hard work as an ambassador for all horsemen.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate y'all. And Ty, it was nice hearing your voice. I really respect and appreciate all you've done for rodeo and horsemanship.
I appreciate it. Congratulations on all of your success. That's phenomenal. And unless you've tried this game, you have it's pretty hard to understand how hard what you have accomplished is.
And for anyone listening, if they are interested in seeing a little bit more of Mr. Jones, his Instagram is PJ Racing Stable. And, maybe give that a follow and learn a little bit more. And hey, if you got a horse that you need trained, I would say he might be your guy.
All right. Well, thank you, Colt. Thank you all. You guys have a good day.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Now we get to move to our feature guest. And of course, that is, I'm going to go ahead and read from the Professional Cowboy Association Hall of Fame, of which he's a member, Mr. Ty Murray. And said his childhood goal was to be the best cowboy ever and the first cowboy to beat the record of 6 world all-around titles set by Larry Mahan and matched by Tom Ferguson. Now, Murray's dominance on the professional circuit began in 1988 when he won bareback riding and overall Rookie of the Year awards. Next year, it took home his first all-around world champion buckle, which is the premier rodeo accolade out there, and then went en route to 7 all-around titles and 2 bull riding championships. And the bio says you rewrote the record books, and most money won in a year, most money won at one rodeo. And in the 93 NFR, one of the highest scored rides at 92 points. And basically, he's known as the ambassador truly for rodeo around the world now. And it's an honor to have Ty Murray this week. Ty, thank you for joining us. And we wanted to leave this time for you and really get to talk about what is on everybody's mind and what you spoke about earlier this week. I think that we can all understand that being a horseman and working with horses is really very challenging, and you've got to love it to be a horseman. And so, Ty, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to let you go ahead and go. And
thanks, Penn. I grew up the son of a racehorse man. My dad was a starter at Ruidoso in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. He started the All-American. He spent all of his winters and we lived in Glendale, Arizona, where he started colts at Turf Paradise. And so, I would say I grew up a racetrack brat, and I exercised, 15 head of horses every day before school at the track. So it's, I feel like it's part of my family. It's something, that I've been around my whole life. Both of my sisters were both involved in horse racing. One of them still is and has been for her life, and so it's something that I've always been connected to. And, so of course I'm a fan of tuning in and watching the Kentucky Derby. And, when we saw what happened after the race where, it turned into a 2-minute debacle in front of 20 million people. And, I had my thoughts and my opinions on why it happened. And it made a lot of people mad. And I'm not really sure why. I'm really trying to advocate for the horse here, because the horse has no voice. And the comments that I made were that Tom Dorrance had said that he wanted to be the horse's lawyer because.
Let me pause here. I want to mention also we're talking about folks, and I'm sorry to cut in, and we really probably should have done a better job of that. However, I wanted to say we're talking about after the race. there was a lot of commotion that surrounded the treatment of Rich Strike, winner of the Kentucky Derby, Mr. Dawson's horse, by an outrider at the Kentucky Derby, Mr. Greg Blasi.
Right. So, as I was saying, when I saw, the outrider waiting to catch that horse, in my mind, the outrider's jobs are to keep everyone safe. And so that might be a horse that's running off. It might be a horse without a rider. It might be a horse that's in danger of going into the rail or maybe running into some other people or something like that. And I've seen a lot of outriders over the years, and I've seen them do some great things. And obviously, Mr. Greg Blasi is a very well respected outrider. But in the case that we saw in the Kentucky Derby, after the race, when he rode up, and all the problems, you can generally, when you see undesirable behavior in a horse, a lot of the time you can link it back to restraint or confinement. And so as Mr. Blasi reached down and grabbed that horse real close to the bit by bridle rein and started pulling his head towards his lap, you will see that Rich Strike kind of keeps shaking his head, trying to get freed up, trying to get out of that restraint or confinement. And, being an outrider, you've got to be a tough guy. And when you enter up into something, sometimes you're talking about very hairy situations. And I appreciate his grit and determination. I just felt this was the wrong time for it. The horse was giving him all kind of indications that he needed some room, that he was being really confined and restrained. It wasn't something that he was ready for after running his heart out for 1.25 miles. And this is where I feel like a little bit of feel and could have went a long ways. We then saw the horse start to nip at his horse.
What do you mean by a little bit of feel? A little bit of feel. Let's break it down.
Feel would be that when you grab a horse and go to constraining him like that, and he's giving you indications that it's not working for him, you've got to do something else. Now, if that means give him some more line and maybe trot out, or it might mean stepping away from him and trotting beside him. Really, in this case, by the time they got turned around, they were really just walking. But I'm just trying to dispel why this happened. And, everybody got pretty mad at me, and I'm just trying to help look out for an industry that I grew up in, because, whether you think it was cruel or not, whether you think it was good or bad horsemanship or any of that, none of that really matters whenever you're on a public forum that 20 million people are watching live, and there's no telling how many millions of replays there's going to be. I don't think anybody wants to watch somebody fist fight a horse. Whether you agree that it works for the horse or not, which I would suggest science says it doesn't. As a sport on a world stage, you have to do everything you can to avoid situations like that. And
I also would say that, I think that it's fair to say that a lot of professionals noticed that incident, and you were also probably the first notable person being, champion cowboy and horseman, and as well as a commentator for CBS to come out with a statement such as that. The first guy through the wall always gets bloodied.
Well, I mean, I'll take the arrows because I believe what I say, and I didn't say anything the day of the race. After the race, I didn't say anything. But it was when I started seeing everybody say that horse is a savage. He's a man eater. He's on a tear. We're talking about an herbivore herd animal, and whenever you see a horse get to a point like that, it's because he's in a position that he has to fight. They are herbivores. They're not lions. And this horse gave a lot of indications that this was going to go downhill pretty fast. And it started by shaking his head. And And when you ignore, that, then it turns into nipping your pony horse. And then when you ignore that, or not even really ignore it, that whenever you turn that into a fist fight, that he's still restrained and constrained, and you're fist fighting him. The horse's only option is to fight back. And, I know that the picture of the horse biting Mr. Blassie, I know that picture has went all around, but you've got to look at it in the context of when it happened. That happened way down the line. And that horse had give a lot of suggestions that it was coming. And so, I was just trying to get everybody to see it, to advocate for the horse, and to get people to look at it from the horse's point of view, because he's not just a man-eating dragon that wants to eat people. He lives on grass, and I think that when you're talking about an industry that is 100% based on horses, that I feel like this should have been known, especially at the very highest level of the Kentucky Derby that's on the biggest world stage.
Ty, you and I, we spoke for a good length of time the other day, and I really felt like I was able to kind of connect and understand where you're coming from. I had the immense pleasure and opportunity when I attended Colt Military Academy to actually be the stable sergeant. I was in charge of the horses. I made sure things were taken care of. I made sure things got put away properly. And one thing that I would always strive for is I would speak Mark Waller.
That's 100 plus head of horses.
Yeah.
By the way. And at that time, many of them were, and it's not that way now. Many of them were in, I think, if I recall, they were all in standing stalls the entire time I was there with a rope and straw.
When I was there, it went from standing stalls to, we called it the bubble, which was just this massive barn that essentially was standing stalls while the riding hall and arena was getting remodeled, and then it turned into actual stalls for the horses, which is much more preferred, obviously. So what I'm steering towards here is, I would see a cadet with a horse, and they just didn't mesh, and there was nothing wrong with that horse. There's nothing wrong with the cadet. Just sometimes, just like people don't get along, a horse and a rider won't get along. So I strive to ensure that a proper horse was set for a proper cadet. Now, in my doing so, the riding staff seemed to learn that, and I think Penn can attest to this. They seem to learn of my riding ability, and so as I put other people on good horses, the riding staff started putting me on project horses, and project horses seemed to escalate. And my final year, I was riding a dressage horse sideways through pass and review and parade, rearing, trying to keep it in dress.
In dress is meaning in line, and riding in formation, which is challenging.
Yeah. But my point is you need to learn the horse. You need to learn the horse's mannerisms. You need to learn what the horse, gets scared of. And all the while learning this horse, you learn that at the end of the day, the horse doesn't want to hurt you. The horse doesn't want to come after you. The horse, I don't know the percentages, so I'm not going to pretend like I do, but a very, very high percent of individuals who get hurt on horses, it was caused by that individual or an exterior situation that does not involve or reflect on the horse. Do you think that that it was done intentionally by the horse, or do you think that it was a situation that was caused by exterior actions or situations that could have been avoided?
Well, I think it could have 100% been avoided. And, I'm not talking about let's feed Fluffy carrots and don't have Fluffy do anything that Fluffy doesn't want to do. I'm talking about the basic principles of handling an equine. And I'm not talking about high-level horsemanship or equitation here. I'm just talking about that when you ride up to a horse that doesn't need to be grabbed. Nobody was in danger. This horse was just slowly pulling up after a race. And to be grabbed in that way scared the horse. And the horse was shaking his head and trying to say, hey, what's going on here with this manhandling? And as he's shaking his head, then Mr. Blassie, and I understand his job description is to be tough and to stay hooked, but this wasn't the time for that. The horse was giving him those indications, and you've got to, as a horseman, you've got to have some feel to adjust to the situation and recognize what signals your horse is giving you. That horse was giving him all the signals of, hey, buddy, this grabbing my head and pulling it into your lap by the bit isn't working for me. And then, as I say, you see it escalate to nipping, and then it was a minute and 45 seconds later that he gets bit on the leg. And so, animals always give you signs of what's coming when something bad is coming. And so, if it's your job to read those signs, and people are, I think that people are mad at me. Some people are mad at me because they feel like it's that I'm trying to attack Mr. Blassie, and that's not the case. I don't know the man. I can tell he's a very well-respected man, but you can't talk about a pilot error plane crash without mentioning the pilot. And I've been working at understanding a horse very hard for the last 25 years. And I've had, what I'm talking about, I've had proven to me a million different ways. And so this isn't something where I'm just some old bull rider that's flying off the handle and spouting a bunch of stuff that I don't know what I'm talking about. And what I was trying to say is that there are so many guys and so many ways that you can gain this knowledge. And like I said, we're not talking about high level equitation. We're just talking about the simple premises of handling a horse. Like you see all the stud chains that are always run over the top of his gum. I promise you that is not a needed restraint device that causes pain.
Well, I was going to say we're going to share some photos here while we go through of ties that he's provided to us, and many of them involve, it's the wildest thing in the world. I don't see a bit. I don't see a bridle. It's for me, it's very unique and amazing to me how you're able to do that. And so when you spoke of restraints, I just wanted to kind of share some of these you provided, and let's go into one of that. And Rachel had a question, so go ahead, Rachel.
And I think, kind of what you're conveying, Ty, and what you said publicly, how I definitely conveyed it, and I think a lot of people missed this, is, you're being the advocate for the horse, but most importantly, these were extraordinary circumstances. It was extraordinary for the horse. He hadn't ran a race like that before. The setting we put him in is not something he's used to, and like Paul had mentioned earlier, is they don't normally have, a pony horse run up and grab him and say, hey, we're going to come over here and interview. The horse isn't trained to do that. And we still have to keep in mind, he's still a 3-year-old horse. He's inexperienced and exposed to a lot of this. And, those extraordinary circumstances are not normal conditions. And I think it rings true with what you're trying to convey, which is you don't want people to see this scenario and say, hey, that's the norm. That's normal. That's like, oh, every horse does that after a race. And that we can't negate striving for good horsemanship every day, whether you're on the track, whether you're starting colts out in your backyard, you have to always strive for good horsemanship. And that this isn't what we normally see. And the conditions the horse was put in is not what he normally sees. And so that short bit of this horse fighting, a lot of people, like you already said, the horse is a monster. And then you come out with your comment saying, no, he's not a monster. He's just responding to this spaghetti bowl he was just thrown into. And then, of course, you get the response that the horse, the outrider is just doing what he can to protect everybody and this and that. And I really think it rings true with just trying to strive with good horsemanship. And this isn't normal circumstances. I think that's really what I want to drive forward with, is these are not normal circumstances at all.
Well, I'm I'm gonna disagree a little bit, because this is horse racing and this is at the Kentucky Derby. So this horse didn't just fall off of a peanut truck.
Right.
And, you know, in my lifetime, I've watched maybe 1 million races, and I've seen 1 trillion horses pull up after the wire, and they slowly slow down around the turn, and then they get slowed up to where they can be stopped and turned around. And as you see with the other 19 horses, they all walked quietly back to the winner's circle, as Rich Strike was trying to do, even at the point that they were going down, you know, with the outrider. There wasn't a wreck to save. There was no wreck going on, except for the one that was coming, that the horse gave 10 indications that it was going to happen before it did happen. And so, you know, I'm trying to advocate for the horse, because if this is something that you don't understand about horses, there are so many ways out there that you can be educated about this to where you'll have this understanding. I don't feel like this was a unique situation. This horse is a great horse and a champion type of horse, or he wouldn't have been in the Kentucky Derby to start with. And whenever we're talking about the highest level of a horse industry, I think that the most basic thing there is in just handling a horse was either not understood or forgotten, or you know, I don't know exactly. I don't know the outrider. I have nothing against the outrider. And I'm sure he's done some great things in saving people and horses in the past. I have no axe to grind. I have no dog in this fight. I'm not looking to be a clinician. I have no financial gain in this. I'm just trying to advocate for the horse and get people to go, now, wait a minute, did we maybe cause this? Because this was 100% human cause. And, you know, to me, it's no different than a stud chain. So you can take a stud chain and you can run it over the top of a horse's gum. And anytime he does anything, you can jerk on it and cause him pain. And he may, you know, the pain may make him submit a little bit, but you're not you're not addressing why the horse was maybe getting excited or scared or nervous or anxious or prancing or trying to get away or whatever. You're missing 100 things to think you just have to go to a stud chain and start jerking on it. And, you know, I knew that people were going to say he's a stallion or he's a jacked up stallion. He's, you know, all those things. You know, I just keep leaning back to, they're not man-eaters. They're not lions. And this horse was backed into a corner that he couldn't get out of.
Well, Ty,
let me continue. They're a fight or flight animal. And when they can't flight, they will fight, especially a stud. And at the highest levels of a industry that is built on horses, everyone involved, especially the outrider, should have this understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Ty.
How can racing horses be cultivated differently, in your opinion? And for the betterment of the animals, just as Mr. Jones and Mr. Dawson's described as having unique needs?
It's like it's so simple and so complex at the same time. A horse, you know, they're not like people, other than they have the same tendencies, but they all have different personalities. That would be one of the only comparison to a human that I can make. And you have to understand that this is a prey animal, a fight or flight prey animal. And, this was such a hot button topic. And, you know, people think I'm now PETA and I'm trying to shut down horse racing, and they act like I let some secret out to PETA. You know, this was witnessed by 20 million people all over the world live. So, it's not like I was letting some secret out. Everybody saw a fist fight with a horse on television. And, there's so many avenues now to get educated on the way the horse sees the world, and quit trying to cram our way of seeing the world down a horse's neck. And, I did this for the first 20 years of my life. I was raised on the track, and I had some, we will say, information that was wrong handed down to me, that was handed down to my dad, that was handed down to my granddad, and handed down to his granddad. So it's been generations of kick him in the belly, show him who's boss, put a twisted wire snaffle on, get his mouth tendered up, or whatever it is. These things, they're not working. So here's the thing that I would say. If I'm wrong, if I'm completely wrong, and the outrider was right, he got bit like like a minute and 45 seconds into this fiasco. So if I'm wrong, and what I'm saying isn't the way it is and the way the horse sees the world, then did that method work? Because I would give you a big no, that the situation just continued to get worse and worse and worse. And a minute 45 later, we're watching him get his thigh bitten off.
I think an empathy is a great word to describe. And would you agree that having the ability to empathize with a person, like you mentioned, they're much like people. Like, empathy is a unique concept in that I've come to believe that being able to understand someone or some animal and their circumstances well enough to know if we can and should be holding them accountable in some form or fashion, and being in sync with them about that.
I don't know the answer to that. I know that I personally do have empathy for a horse, especially a young horse that you're trying to teach them how to play all the different games that we've made up. Take away horse racing, there's a million other games that we play with horses, whether it's cutting, reining, rodeo, calf roping, dressage, jumping, endurance races. I mean, there's just, the list goes on and on and on and on. And we can keep trying to, how many times have you been riding a horse they're herd animals. They want to go where the other horses are. So you're on a horse and he's getting anxious.
I've grabbed dirt because of that situation a few times growing up.
So this is where educating yourself is going to help. So you don't eat dirt, because, you're told as you're a kid, make him stand there, make him do this. So let's constrain him more. Let's get a bigger bit, whatever, when you're looking at some traditional horsemanship methods that don't work, you will notice that they all kind of revolve around restraint, whether it be, cross tying a horse or using a bigger bit, or it's also goes beyond just the mechanics of the devices that you use, and it becomes a mental thing. So when you have that horse that is starting to jig and get excited because his buddies are a mile over there gathering cows, and your job is to wait over here. When you try to constrain, you'll watch that horse's behavior get worse. You'll watch him start nickering and spinning around and rearing up and all of that thing. I know anybody listening to this that has any experience whatsoever with horses has experienced this. So that's why I'm using it for an example. Where the restraint doesn't work. If you look at all the undesirable behaviors, most of them all link back to restraint. So if you can let that horse move their feet because they're a flight animal, that makes them feel better. You'll see at the end, after the fiasco, when they just started moving out with some space, there was no more problem. It went away. And so, these are the things that I'm trying to tee up for people to see, so that they can go, you know what, maybe what old granddad handed down to me doesn't work, because I've tried it 1,000 times and it's never worked. And, that was the point that I finally came to. That was the point that I finally came to, at about age 20. I was tired of these methods that had been handed down to me that I wasn't getting good results from. And I didn't have happy horses. I didn't have horses that enjoyed working with me. And so learning how to approach a horse from the perspective of communication instead of trick training or repetition trick training, because the problem that I have with like repetition trick training is you can get them to where they can do a certain trick good. But that's all you have. That doesn't mean you have a horse that is broke enough that you can do anything on them and they understand your communication. You've just kind of done a trick training and done a certain thing 1,000 times. And that's what you see a lot of in all the different disciplines that you see with horses. If it's calf roping, you just go out there and you just make the horse do it the way you want, and you do it a bunch. But that doesn't mean that there's communication there between the human and the horse. And whenever you get to a place that you can have a very subtle line of communication open with a horse, then you can avoid all these things that you haven't been able to teach him that particular trick, because there's a million circumstances and a million scenarios that you're going to come across if you're dealing with a horse, and you cannot trick train and repetition train all of those scenarios. Something that I would want to add. So like the horse shaking his head and starting to nip at the pony, that's the equivalent to, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a country where there's wild monkeys. So they'll come up to you very friendly and they want you to give them some fruit or something like that. If you try to get too close to take a picture or you want to pet him or something like that, he will give you indications before he bites you. He'll show you his teeth and he'll give you a look like, if you come any closer, I'm going to bite you. That's pretty easy to see, right? Horses give all the same indications. And so, for me, when I'm watching the Kentucky Derby and I watch the outrider really start to constrain this horse and he starts giving all these indications, it felt the exact same to me as watching that monkey show you his teeth and say, if you keep this up or come a little closer, you're going to get bit. And that horse gave indications for quite a while, pretty good indications by shaking his head, nipping the horse's neck. Well, when it turned into a fight, the horse is not learning. Everybody's saying that's not. So what'd you want, Ty? Did you want the outrider to train him? No, I didn't want him to train him. When a horse is in that frame of mind, you can't teach them anything anyway. But you have to have the understanding to move away from the monkey because he's getting ready to bite you.
What I'm hearing from you, Ty, is that, rather than the PETA aspect as you've shared and things of that nature going against the grain of the industry, what I'm hearing and what I can relate to is you're actually trying to do the exact opposite. You're trying to ensure that the industry is represented properly in such a large stage event. I mean, it's like seeing two football teams brawl in the center of the field during the
Colt. That's actually pretty different, because if you're watching two football teams brawl, you're talking about two humans, and
right.
And so that's very different. And whenever you're talking about animals, in being one of the founders of the PBR, the very first thing that we did right off the bat was we outlawed hot shots. Now, it doesn't matter if you think a hot shot is cruel to a bovine or not. That's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is when you have 20 million people all over the world watching your sport or wanting to be interested in your sport, a lot of people that haven't grown up around livestock or maybe moved livestock, they don't want to see you shocking animals. So that is just one little example of something that we did because we want the animals to retain their dignity. I know a lot of negative comments were about well, you're a rodeo cowboy, you used to spur animals for a living, and so I could see how this could maybe feel confusing to people, because I did grow up idolizing guys like Larry Mahan and guys that were adept at riding bucking animals. It's something that I dedicated my life to. I can tell you that in my entire career, riding over 6,000 bucking animals, that I never in my life tried to hurt one. And that's still the case today. Like, I'll give you another example. So when a colt does get unsure, and maybe you missed something and they feel like they need to spook, shoot forward, or buck, what is the first thing that you see happen from the rider? You'll see them grab the reins and pull the reins as hard as they can and squeeze with their legs and just clamp onto this animal for all they're worth. So that goes back to, the thing that I'm talking about the restraint and the confinement. So the animal got to the point that he's either going to buck or spook or shoot forward because he is unsure about something or he's scared. He's a fight or flight animal. So now when you constrain him and you grab a hold of him and you try to pull his head around or just pull back as hard as you can and squeeze up, now you've confirmed whatever they thought they were afraid of, and you're going to watch it get worse. And so, that's why when I'm riding a young colt, it feels so important to me if they do get scared or spook, that I go forward with them. So I try to always be prepared that I'm holding on in a way, like to my saddle horn or my night latch or something besides their mouth, so that if they do, something does spook them, which horses are going to get spooked because they're a prey animal, that I can just quietly and softly go along with them. And then they've had a second or two to process it and go, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm all right. But when you watch a horse shoot forward and you watch a guy clamp down with his legs and pull up on his bit and got this horse cranked up and confined, that's when you see the bomb go off and you'll see that it just builds and turns into a bomb.
Absolutely. And I think, that last thing you just mentioned too about, not every person is the world's greatest horseman. They're not, and not everybody has to be. And, the reaction time and how we react with young horses or any adult horse, horses are a good reflection of ourselves. It kind of brings me to a question I have for you. I know earlier you had mentioned, these methods that are passed down through generations, and you're like, hey, this isn't working anymore. I want to try something different. And, whether those methods are how you handle a horse or the equipment you use or where you take them and stuff like that. I definitely have seen more recently, and this also rang true with, instilling, banning hot shots at the PBR because the equipment and you have more eyes on you. Something you had brought up earlier, was the stud chain on Rich Strike's mouth. And not too long ago, the AQHA banned the use of stud chains in halter classes. And it was a very contradictory decision for them to come to, because there is, and vets use stud chains all the time. There is, the scientific aspect of, if used properly, it can help release endorphins and that horse can calm down. But they met the contradictory fork in the road where it's not always used properly. And they can't guarantee that every person is going to know the purpose of that piece of equipment, how to use it properly. And I haven't spoke to anybody who was at those board meetings to make those decisions for banning the stud chains. But from what I can infer, they didn't want to run into the risk of it being seen in a bad light, the wrong people saying the wrong action, and it can be misused very, very quickly. And if you, had an opinion about certain pieces of equipment that you still think are beneficial, but often get misused so much that they have adverse effects on horses, and maybe some old equipment and tack, bits, anything that you can think of that were probably great pieces of equipment, but they hardly ever get used appropriately.
Well, that's a great question, Rachel. I do believe that we have a lot of devices that are used on horses without an understanding of the device, how it works, and sometimes even all the different devices that could be helpful. Like we'll just use a snaffle bit for an example. The snaffle bit, I think an example of a way that it would be misused is when people think that it's brakes, and that they just, when they want to stop, they just pull on the brakes. And if they want to stop faster, pull harder. And if they want to stop harder and faster, jerk them as hard as you can. And so, if you're trying to advocate for the horse, what would that be like to the horse? If you had somebody on your back that's asking you to run, and then just out of nowhere, you get jerked on your mouth. Are you going to be able to stop good, even if you can make the connection that that's what they want? And so, I use a snaffle bit or a bosal or a halter, or it could be a string around their neck as a teaching tool. So I would offer something more subtle first, like sitting down.
I do believe that, honestly, the concept, one I learned early on, writing English as was a requirement. My dad really learned at Culver, having to pass that dressage test, which is really hard. Legs, that your legs and your body and the physical connection with the horse are far more important than the reins. Much like as a pilot, I can say that you can't steer an airplane on the ground with the wheel.
Well, I agree with that, but right. So, but everything can be misused. So you can hang on a horse with your legs. You can hang on a horse with your spurs. If you think that if you're operating a horse like a machine, which us humans are kind of inclined to do, we drive a car, so we always have contact, and we're always doing this. Well, people get on a horse, and that's how they want to do the horse, and they just want to. They think this is a steering wheel and this is brakes, steer, brakes, steer, brakes. Well, what happens is that it turns into you're pulling on them all of the time. And so it means less and less. And, from the horse's standpoint, they're just saying, well, you pull on me all the time anyway, no matter what I do. So maybe I would do something leaning more towards what I want to do. And if you can use it, if you can think of all of the things, whether it's your legs, your spurs, your bridle, whatever that may be, if you use it as a teaching tool and give the horse something else first. So if we're going to use stopping for an example, the first time you're on a colt and you sit down and quit riding, he's not going to know to stop. Right? So I would pick up a rein so my ask would be, I would sit down. I know he's not going to stop. He's a colt. He doesn't know. I use like a ask, suggest, promise would be the way that I would try to explain this. So then I go to suggest by picking up a rein, 2 reins. It doesn't really matter. It could be anything. You could do anything to let him know that you're asking for something. But in this example, I pick up a rein. He's still not going to stop because he's a colt and he doesn't know to stop. So then my promise, my escalation, my third level would be I would get in his way with 1 rein, 2 reins. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to get in his way until he tries to stop. The minute he tries to stop, I let go. So that's where he makes the connection, is if I can let go when he's trying to. If you come back the next time when you sit down and quit riding, he may still not stop yet. This is the second time. But as I pick that rein up, he's going to go, wait, I remember this. Could I stop? Now, then when he tries to stop, I let go right there. And all I did was pick up the rein. But I let go and say, yeah, that's all I wanted. I just wanted you to stop. By the third time, when you set down, the horse says, I think I can stop. And then all you got to do is allow the horse to stop. And so, this is really one example that you do over and over in a million scenarios with a horse, that you will not only get a better stop, but you're going to take away a lot of anxiety. And whenever you're talking about performance-based sports with horses, anytime you can remove anxiety and add leadership to where they're not trying to fill in blanks of what it is you're wanting, that's going to help the horse not only perform better physically, but it's going to help him perform better mentally as well, because he doesn't have anxiety of somebody slamming on the brakes by pulling a bit hard in his mouth out of nowhere. Because when you sit down, it's just a very subtle gesture or cue that says, I would like to stop. And a horse's favorite thing to do is stop when they know that that's an option. But most of the time what I see is people riding around with their bridle reins right here and a horse's head up here like this with a tie down on, and he's jigging and prancing, and and they're riding the brakes the whole way, trying to get their horse to slow down.
I've looked at your post time and time again, and at the very end says, come on, guys, we can and have to do way better than this. And you say we.
I'm not pointing the finger as to, hey, everybody, I'm smarter than you. That's not my intent, and I don't feel that I'm smarter than anyone. I feel that I have spent the last 25 years educating myself how a horse sees the world so that I can operate better with my horses. And I've had things proven to me a million different ways and a million different times that there's better horsemanship available out there. There's a better understanding of a horse. We all grow up where you're given very little information, and the information that you're given doesn't add up to the horse. We're still trying to communicate with a horse in a way that makes sense to us humans, and it doesn't work. And I have I've done everything that is bad horsemanship. I've done, and so I'm not trying to sit here and act like that I'm smarter than everyone else. I'm trying to say that we are all in this together. If you love horses, if you have anything to do with a horse, we're all in this together. And on top of that, I'm a born and bred racetracker. I grew up. My great grandfather raced horses. The reason that I seeked horsemanship so hard is because I saw that I didn't have happy, willing horses that had a clear understanding of what I was trying to do or what I was wanting to do all of the time. And so I've been putting in the work, like I said, for the last 25 years at trying to have a better understanding of a horse and honing my skills to where we have a communication level that works for the horse and makes sense to the horse. And he goes, oh, that's what you want? Yeah, I give you that, instead of just trying to make everything happen. See, growing up, what I always say is, I grew up where you just, kick them to go, pull them to stop, make them do whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And I can do that. My dad, there wasn't anything that my dad couldn't make a horse do. And really there wasn't anything that I couldn't make a horse do. We had, junior rodeo, and we had great horses. People tried to buy our horses every weekend, but we didn't have we could make them do the monkey trick. We could, whether it be if it was calf roping or team roping or barrel racing or whatever, we could drill the monkey trick into the horse. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is horsemanship and having the understanding of a horse. And everything is so easily blamed on the horse that it happens all the time. And if you notice in my post, I called out that it was going to happen. And I said they're gonna be saying, oh, he's a stud, he's jacked up, he's a man eater, he's savaging, all this stuff, and that's what everybody said. And through what I have, worked very hard to learn to understand about horses, I see it a completely different way. And I hope that this whole thing and the things that I'm trying to do in horsemanship, with, doing myself and the things that I'm doing with the guys like Martin Black, like Dennis Reese, that somebody will be inspired to go get a better understanding of a horse. And you can keep trying to beat the square peg in the round hole, but you notice how when you do that, you keep having undesirable behaviors, and they pop up when you need them the least. And so it might be, if you're a barrel racer, you run the pattern 1,000 times at home, and you're trick training that thing, and you're doing it the way it makes sense to you. And then you go to the big rodeo or the jackpot or whatever it is, and they blow it, and you're like, well, whatever. And even if you're saying it's my fault, if there's a better understanding there's a lot less chance of blowing anything. And whenever you can take the anxiety out of the equation, it not only helps them physically get better, but it's going to help them to do everything else better because they don't have that level of anxiety.
No, that's great. And here's what's brought to my mind, and I want to kind of bring it home here. And we now have established, breaking racehorses in your history with the race. Let's go to the rough stock. I recall, we all recall Bodacious and Tough Hedeman's, that incident. And we all recall a lot of rough stock riders have the ability to say, I'm not going to ride tonight, that horse, for our own personal reasons, but we have the ability, or you had the ability. I mean, how many times did you choose to scratch?
The only time I would ever, I guess, what you would call scratch is if I had an injury or I was up at multiple rodeos on the same night. I would try to go where I thought that I had the best stock to give me the best chance of winning. But I never just...
Well, I'm saying in rough stock, you have that ability to do that for your own health, for your own safety. A horse, it doesn't have the ability to go up to the office and say, I'm going to scratch.
That's our job. It's our job to have a good enough understanding of our animal.
We're going to go ahead with Rachel and Colt ending up, and we're going to go ahead and finish up with Ty Murray. And really what we found here is he's really trying to speak for the horse and with tons of experience, and not the opposite that I think many people perceived. And what would be your parting words before we get to some other questions from some interested kids out there that submitted them for you, and wrap up today?
Well, I think my parting statement would be, Tom Dorrance is a guy that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. I would go as far as to say he's a hero of mine. I think he had a better understanding of the horse, maybe than anyone that's ever lived. I think he has helped change the world for horses. It still has a ways to go, but he definitely gave it a good start. And the thing that he would always say is observe, remember, and compare. So if you don't buy into the ideas and philosophy that I'm sharing, then observe. If we're going to use this topic that we're talking about, which is, after the Kentucky Derby, I would say observe what happened, remember it, and then compare. And if you want to say, if you want to be on the side of the fence. Now here's one thing I wanted to clear up. Everybody's like, oh, what would you do? You'd have just let the stud eat your leg off? No, I absolutely would not have. And if the horse just came up and bit me out of the blue, which I don't feel that they do. I feel like there are indications that it's going to happen. But let's say that it just did. I absolutely am going to have a very quick and decisive reprimand at that moment to get them off of me and to say, not that,
What does that look like for the lay person, for the lay horseman?
Well, that might have been knocking him off my leg, or that might have been blocking him when I saw him coming. I'm not saying, we're not saying, hey, Fluffy, give Fluffy a cookie and pet him and let's all, this isn't kumbaya stuff. This is just understanding of a horse's nature. And so, going back to observe, remember, and compare, for me, if you're on the side that you want to say, I'd have hit him in the head with a baseball bat, or I would have knocked his teeth out, or if a stallion savages me, I'm going to defend myself. I understand that. I would have to defend myself too. The part that I'm trying to talk about here is everything that happened before that, because it was human caused. It was, it kept going because of the human. It never did make sense to the horse. The horse didn't think he could fly, so he decided that he had to fight. And you saw things didn't get better. They ended up getting way worse. And we saw a very well-respected outrider get a very bad bite. And trust me, if anyone knows how bites feel, I'm definitely one of them. And I don't hope that for anyone. But I'm just trying to get the industry to go, maybe we're missing something here. And the thing that I was trying to share, there is so much, these are the kind of books that I read. And so, this is science. This isn't an opinion. This isn't a philosophy of which kind of horsemanship do you like? This is fact-based science on how a horse's brain, how a human's brain works, and how you meld the two. This is something that's very interesting to me, and I've worked long and hard to try to understand this. So I'm trying to open people's eyes to, instead of just jerking on them or fighting with them or keep trying to cram our way of thinking down their neck, maybe we could get a better understanding of the horse and become better at reading a horse so that we know how to adjust ourselves to get the whatever it may be that we are wanting from a horse. Because if you remember that they're an herbivore herd animal, they are very good at getting along whenever we can figure out how to get along with them. And just jerking on them, whipping them, kicking them, punching them, snatching them, putting things on them that hurt them, that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to build a partnership that is based on communication.
And communication always is only is helpful if we have open-mindedness. And I think that's the word of the day, open-mindedness. And I think that being open to new ideas, there's like that in the movie Moneyball, I think we discussed earlier in the week, there's a scene, where one of the old scouts for the 2002 A's is talking to the Brad Pitt, who's playing General Manager Billy Beane. And he's like, you're trying to discount what, something along the lines of baseball scouts have been doing for almost 150 years. You can't, and he says, look, he's like, I've seen you in those rooms talking to those kids and saying, that they're going to be a great player, and you don't. Adapt or die is what he said. And I think that's it's a hard way to say it. It's like, though, if I was more, I've become enlightened by what you've said, in that I've never really thought to say, I'm going to get in the mindset of my horse, try to find an empathetic nature with the horse. I've worked very hard in my life to do that in my relationships, communications with humans. And it's been, over a decade since I was really actively riding horses on a daily basis.
Here's what I would want to say. I tried to make a post that would maybe get people to see things a different way. And that's why I agreed to come on your podcast, is because I believe in everything that I'm saying. This is not about, Fluffy doesn't have to do anything Fluffy doesn't want to do, and let's just feed him cookies and let's just be friends and you run the show and I'll just try to, that's not even close to what I'm talking about. We're in a day and age where there's so much good information out there. It ain't that hard to seek. You've just got to have the desire to have this information. And there's wonderful information out there. I can tell you that it drastically changed my life with horses. I now have happy, willing horses that don't dread their job. They catch me. I don't have to go catch them. And I'm talking about, I have them turned out on hundreds of acres. And when they see me, here they come. And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm the first one to tell you that I was as bad a hand as there's ever been. I've made every mistake that doesn't make sense to a horse that you can make. I promise you. I've done them all, and I did them all for 20 years. And necessity is the mother of all invention. So I had the need that I was so tired of fighting with horses, being frustrated with horses. Horses are very willing animals. They live in the moment. They're not looking to give you a hard day. They're not looking to disobey you. They don't understand it. 99 out of 100 times when you're having trouble with some kind of a maneuver or something you want from a horse, it's because that he doesn't understand. And, that goes back to what I was saying about we're not teaching them somersaults. We're just trying to convey to them how to do what they already knew how to do from the time they were a day old. We're just trying to subtly be able to convey that to them so that they can give this to us. And it makes me sad whenever you start to talk about a higher level of horsemanship, how you hear people say, oh, you're going to buy you a carrot stick and never ride him and give him cookies and just pet Fluffy and don't do anything that Fluffy doesn't want to do. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. I've had a big respect for cowboys my entire life, and I still do to this day. And if you can look at, the better horsemanship clinicians that are out there and tell me that they can't get anything done in a soft, quiet, happy horse manner, then you and I are looking at two different pictures. And it just feels to me like when there's all this information out there, why wouldn't you get it to make everything go smoother, happier, funner for you and your horse?
I think, and do you feel this day and age, people are less open-minded and less willing to listen, and not just in the horse world?
Well, I don't know if I know the answer to that. The only thing I really have to judge is my 52 years on this planet. And, for me, it feels the same as it did when I was a kid. It feels the same to me at Churchill Downs that it does at Raton, New Mexico. We as humans have done things for a long time that don't make sense to the horse. So, you're talking about a being that just lives in every second, and all he's looking for is he's just looking out for number one. He's a prey animal. He's just looking to find safety and comfort, and this can be achieved while still doing whatever performance event it is that you want to do. You just have to educate yourself and work very hard at it and do everything that you can to become more adept at having a line of communication with your horse that makes sense to your horse. Everybody has a line of communication, but 99 out of 100 times it generally makes sense to the human and not the horse. So everybody's providing a feel. I'm just trying to learn how to provide a better feel that is a lot easier for the horse to have a subtle understanding of what I'm wanting.
I'm going to say that I've appreciated everything I've been able to learn for today, not only from you, from Rick Dawson, the owner of Rich Strike, who you're advocating for, who obviously has, we all saw a lot of respect for you. And to the listeners out there, we wanted to get these folks together to show that, there's a certain level of congruency between horsemen. We all care about the true horsemen. We all care about our horses, and we can all be better. And I want to get to some questions from kids involved in the rodeo world under the 18. They're very unique, and none of them really surround this topic, which I love. And the first one's from Christina Darger, who's 13 from Ukiah, California. And she wanted to ask you, Mr. Murray, how can I keep my horse liking running barrels? She likes all her roping events, but is dreading her barrel runs.
So I really love this question, and this is a smart little girl to be looking at this because you see a lot of dread in this event. You see a lot of people that have trouble even getting their horse into the arena. Well, that's a pretty good indication that he's not having a blast. And so something that I would suggest for her to try is to put 5 barrels in the arena instead of 3. And you can go around the barrels any way that you want. So if you put a pattern of 3, just like, barrel racing would be, and then put 2 more barrels down here. And just take your horse and go around the barrels. And every time that horse, when he's not going around the barrel, you keep trying. And as he starts to come around the barrel you want, ride him out and just stop him and let him rest. And when, after he fills up his air tank, then start going around other barrels. And you can do the pattern, but say you go around a barrel and he blows it. I just keep going around it. And I would try to ask him lighter and softer. And I'd say, how about try this? And as soon as I feel him come in and come around that barrel the way that I would want, I would let him dribble out to a stop, and I would just stop and let him rest. You've got to make the horses have to have a yes and a release. And that, this is a very hard thing to try to explain very fastly on a podcast, but you're always trying to, like for me, if I'm sorting cows, I make the cow the relief. So I'm not putting pressure on the horse when he's cutting the cow. Where he would feel pressure is when he's not. So that's my point in talking about barrel racing. When he's not turning the barrel very good, that's where he feels pressure. The minute he starts to turn that barrel good, all the pressure goes away. And that's just, they're going to seek what's easy. They're going to seek what gives them relief. They're going to seek what gives them a rest. And if you can start showing them that when you do this right around here like that, then we rest. That's how you can get one to start to want to cooperate with you and give you the type of terms that you want. The biggest thing is you've got to remember that you're trying to convey to them what you want, and riding them like a motorcycle and just pulling on their head, that's not very good information. So you've got to educate yourself on how to give them better information of what you're wanting. And that's why you see me riding bridleless, because whenever you ride bridleless, you have to figure out a way to let your horse know what it is that you're wanting besides pull and pull some more. And
I want to try it. I'm now you got me wanting to try the bridleless.
Well, it's a pretty big step just to go from not knowing anything to a horse bridleless. So
I can't imagine.
Riding bridleless isn't some trick that I want to show people. It's not something that I'm trying to do and say, look at me, I don't have to have a bridle on my horse. Whenever you take the bridle out of the equation, you have to give your horse more information other than sitting up there like you're on a couch and just pull. I want to go there, I'll pull. I want to stop, I'll pull. I want to go there, I'll pull. I want to back up, I'll pull. I want to wait, I'll pull. You're getting excited, I'll pull. So the next thing you know, all you're doing is pull. And then, the horse at some point is going to say, well, if all you're going to do is pull on me no matter what I do, why don't you pull on me while I run back to the barn and go see all my buddies and eat some hay and stand in the shade? So you can give your horse a bunch of yeses with just straightness. If you're just riding your horse to the arena, and when he's going exactly between your legs on your path, that's all free. And you put pressure on when they're not. If they're dropping a shoulder, pressure on. The minute they quit dropping the shoulder, the pressure comes off. Drop shoulder, the pressure comes on. They quit dropping the shoulder, the pressure comes off. You're just setting it up to where you're giving them a yes when they're doing what you want. You got to remember, they don't understand all of the rules that us humans made up. And so, you've got to ask yourself, does my horse clearly understand what I'm wanting? And I can promise you, if it's a stop and you're just jerking back on a bit, I can promise you he doesn't understand. And that's why you're not getting good stops.
And then hopefully that answers your question, Canyons. And the last one here is from Jagger Case, Davis, Oklahoma. My name is Jagger Case and I am 7 years old. My question for Mr. Murray is, I'm thinking of playing football and my parents are afraid of me getting hurt. My mom is a barrel racer and wants me to ride horses. Since you competed in a rough sport a lot, do you feel like you'd do it again because of all the times you got hurt? Were you ever afraid the bull was going to hurt you? they look pretty scary to me, almost as scary as a T-Rex. Thanks for your time, Mr. Murray Jagger Case.
That's a very cool question and a very honest kid, and I really appreciate that. And absolutely, bull riding that's a good way to put it. It is T-Rex scary. And, I can tell you that I rode 6,000 bucking animals in my lifetime, and I can tell you that I had a very nervous, I guess you could even say scared, but not like a panic scared, oh my God, I'm going to die. But you definitely
the pregame butterflies.
Well, it's more than pregame butterflies, because it's not just the pressure of winning and losing, but in a sport of bull riding, you're talking about the pressure of living and dying can be there. So it is a very scary sport. It was something that I had a fascination with at a young age, and I was very, very driven to do it. It was all I thought about. It was night and day, every day of my life. It's all I thought about. I wanted to be great at riding animals that were trying to throw you off. I thought that Larry Mahan was my hero. He's the guy that I looked up to. He was the best rough stock rider that had ever lived. And I was ate up with wanting to break his record and with wanting to be a cowboy that was adept at riding things that buck. So that being said, I went for it, and that's what I made a career out of. And luckily I had some success, and luckily I had some luck, and some of the things worked out there. I can tell you that, my son my son is 10 years old, and he's only had to make me 2 promises. And one is that he'd never ride bulls. And the second one is that he'd never do drugs, because those are the only 2 things that I'm really scared of that I think could, definitely hurt and possibly kill him. So, it is a very, very, very dangerous sport.
And that's something we just heard a multi-world champion bull rider say that,
I've always known it was dangerous. I knew it was dangerous my whole career. One of my best friends and guy that I traveled with died at Cheyenne. I was right there, Lane Frost and others, Brent Thurman, Jerome Davis, who's paralyzed for life. I've had a lot of friends get hurt and killed in this sport. So, it's a very dangerous sport. It doesn't matter how you slice it. And my advice would be that the only way that I would ever do it is if I was ate up with it. If your mom wishes you did it, or your dad thinks it would be cool, or all your buddies are doing it, or your girlfriend likes it, that's not enough reason. Or you want to have some level of fame, or you think, the money or whatever it is. Those aren't the reasons to do a sport like this, because it can be a lot worse than just losing. So it's something that has to be a fire in you that's burning, and you cannot put it out, and you just eat it, sleep it, and breathe it. And if not, you should maybe look into something that is, is less life-threatening. Because if you're going to just be blunt and truthful about what this sport is, it can be very, very life-threatening.
Do you feel like you'd do it again because of all the times you got hurt?
Well, yeah, I feel like I would do it again. I feel so lucky that I was able to make a living doing something that I truly loved, and I was just enamored by it. I was consumed by it. The art of not only being able to do it physically, but being able to do it mentally. So I would do it again. But I'm I'm born with certain characteristics that worked well for this sport, and not everybody may have those characteristics. So that's why I'm trying to say that if it's not something that you just love, just for the pure fact that you just love the challenge of it, if that's how I was, I wouldn't shoot, because I know how dangerous it is. And like say, I wouldn't do it now. I'm a dad now, I'm a husband now, and I got a lot of people relying on me. And so I'm at a different place in my life, but from the time I was a kid till I was 32, it's all I ever thought about.
And I think that's how we wrap it up. I think I appreciate, because I think the sentiment that I have learned here today, And I always like to look at things from a positive, and that's what we said with this podcast: getting people's beliefs, opinions. Facts are facts. Beliefs are things. And a lot of times, I always believe that contempt prior to investigation is cruelty, and I want everybody deserves a chance to be heard.
And what people are going to say is he was told to go get that horse, and that might even be true, but that still doesn't change the facts of what all happened and what went down and how it could have been avoided, even if you were told to go get that horse. So, again, it's not about calling out Greg Blassie for me, but it's like I said, if you guys had me on a podcast to tell you why the plane crashed and it was due to a pilot's lack of knowledge and he didn't do all of the things that he should have been doing to avoid the crash, then how do you talk about that subject without mentioning the pilot and what he did? And so that's what it feels like to me. I'm not trying to, like I said, I don't know Greg Blassie from anyone, and I'm sure he's a great guy. I can tell he's a well-respected guy, but there's no way around this one. If you can keep blaming it on the human-made mysteries of the horse that aren't true, or he's a savage, or blame it on the horse or that horse, whatever. This situation was 1,000% avoidable.
And your post, from what I've read, does not mention Mr. Blassie by name. I believe that you said we can do a better way of doing this. And that was a great example. Flying. We all play a part in any major issue, and the only way we can improve it is if everyone takes a chance at taking a look and saying, how do I know I'm right? And most of the time, whenever I ask myself a question at first glance, I don't know. And that is what we have I can speak for Colt and Rachel to say, is we want to bring the Western horsemanship world a production that asks that question. How do we know we're right? What are new ideas? What do the experts have to say? What are the rebuttals? I think the real goal for this podcast is trying to bring opinions, bring people that are experts, talk to the actual individuals involved in incidents. And we spoke with the owner of that horse today. We spoke with yourself. We spoke with a premier trainer. And we heard not much about an incident, but just about horsemanship and how to be open-minded. And that's what we want to accomplish with this show. And we look forward to more guests like yourself. And we appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. And it's pretty cool to have somebody like you be on his first steps. And I'm sure for you, it's pretty cool to get to talk to Mr. Dawson and Mr. Jones. We all love learning things about horsemanship. And thank you. And I think I speak for Colt and Rachel in that as well.
Thank you.